So welcome everybody to the Broad Reach podcast. And this is a very special episode because we're interviewing Pat Lawless, who was the Irish competitor in the GGR 2022. So Pat's a 66-year-old. He's a circumnavigator legend, former fisherman, sailor, and his father was also a circumnavigator. He's from Limerick, and you're living in Kerry, Pat. And we're so grateful to have you, Pat. Thanks a million for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be here. Yeah, I live in Ballyfermot, West Kerry.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So where are you right now? Where are you right now, Pat?
I'm at home. I arrived home last night to Ballyfermot. I'm at home in my house. I came home from Lanzarote, flew in from Lanzarote yesterday.
And you, after you finished up in Cape Town, you were involved in moving Ayrton's boat, right? Was that what brought you to Lanzarote?
Yeah, I sailed Ayrton's boat home for him to Lanzarote, and I go back on the 7th, which is just over a week, to sail my own boat back home.
And did you single-hand Ayrton's boat, or did you have crew with you?
No, there was a man, Ryan Smith from Cape Town, asked to come with me, and he came with me. And, I think it was good because, the race was difficult. And I had company coming up, probably difficult for him because I wasn't as happy as I normally would be. But yeah, so no, he sailed up with me. We stopped in Dakar on the way up, which was a fantastic stop, just for 24 hours, Christmas Eve.
Where is that?
Senegal.
Wow.
And it was so fantastic. We sailed in and anchored in an anchorage for yachts, all French. It was a French colony, French yachts. And we went ashore, had a meal, had 3 drinks each, and paid for the anchorage and the taxi in and out. And it came to 13 or 14 euros.
Wow.
It was, yeah. And the beach, it was like paradise. The beach was a bit dirty, but it was a fisherman, all fish, both painted beautiful colours. It was the highlight of sailing back up, actually. Yeah.
And did you need to clear customs going in there, Pat?
No, we didn't. I had a contact there who was in.
I should have asked that. We'd edit that bit out.
Well, no, there was a contact there, and you don't clear customs there.
Okay.
It's just they're not catering for yachts, and the 24. If you were there a week, you wouldn't clear customs. But yeah, it's just the way it goes.
And when you say taxi, Pat, I assume you mean water taxi from the anchorage.
Water taxi, yeah.
So a dinghy came out and picked you up off the boat, brought you ashore, and then brought you back.
It was in and out all day, yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Wow, what an experience. That's amazing. Just going back, Pat, to your own boat in the GGR, the Green Rebel. If you tell us a little bit first about the name. I know it was called Fulmar when you got it, the Saga 36. Did you change it at the end? You changed it to Green Rebel?
Green Rebel sponsored me a company in Cork, and great company. They do wind energy surveys and all that kind of stuff, yeah. And
excellent.
I go down to talk to them on Wednesday.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the rigging of the boat? I know I think I've looked at nearly every interview you've done, Pat. I'm a super fan. So I know you brought 10 sails with you on the boat. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's why we were allowed 10 sails, so I brought 10.
You didn't change much about the rigging. You took out a heating system, I believe. It had a hot air heating system.
The boat had a hot air heating system that wouldn't be allowed because it was too modern. It had chips in it and that.
Yeah.
So I took that out and I put in a stove, which was great. But in the race, I brought too much weight, including a small bag of coal and timber for the fire.
Wow.
And I had to be overloaded. I wouldn't bring the fire again in a race like that.
Well, one of the reasons you got the Saga 36 you mentioned in the past was because you could carry so much cargo. So now, do you think if you were to go again, you wouldn't bring as much stuff possibly?
No, I had enough food and water to go around the world twice. I ran out of time in the end, and really I needed to empty the boat totally out and put it in again. I wound up bringing a lot of fittings I didn't need, and time was my biggest issue prior to the race, so I had 300 to 500 kilos too much weight that I didn't have to bring.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. like water and food and stuff. And
in terms of preparing the boat for the race, if you were to talk about how long it took, I know you sailed. You did a bit of sailing to ice. You did a trip to the Azores, and you did a trip to Iceland as well to kind of test the boat out.
I sailed to France several times, yeah, and I sailed from Amsterdam down to France, and
oh wow,
I sailed a good bit. I sailed, yeah, about 14,000 miles.
Wow.
Maybe looking back, hindsight is great. Maybe I shouldn't have sailed to Iceland. I should have spent more time working on the boat, and yeah, but it was good to get the miles up, and I enjoy sailing. I enjoy preparing the boat, but yeah, running out of time was a problem in the end.
But I know after you sailed to Iceland, you said yourself you had a list of about 120 jobs. You said to Paul Trammell on his podcast, in terms of those jobs and all of the stuff you did, you put up the perspex, and you were, because you're a furniture maker, if anyone doesn't know, so you're brilliant. It's brilliant. Like you're brilliant timber fitter. In terms of the stuff you did and your experience in the GGR, do you think did any of the jobs, did they work out? Like, was the rigging, apart from obviously what went wrong, in terms of structural stuff, was the rigging okay?
The rigging was okay. The mast was very sound. We don't have the expertise in Ireland. And when I went to France, I paid a rigger who was maybe 50 and could climb up the mast without anything. He went up and checked everything. He came down and he gave me some recommendations, and I changed stuff, even down in France. The cap shrouds and the intermediate shrouds were on the round chain plates, and then they were a bit oversized and in length and things like so. Up to the last minute, I was still fixing things in the rigging. And since there's a fella in England, Jade, I would use him. He's a really good rigger. Found him, and he gave me good advice. And in the future, yeah.
I know that one thing that you really wanted to do to the boat before the race was you wanted to put a sleeve in the mast to strengthen it, because you didn't want to lose your mast. And I watched that video on YouTube where you made a steel sleeve, put it into your mast, and had to put all the fixings back on. Really involved job. And what I wanted to ask you was, did that affect the performance of the boat at all? Did you find?
No. That sleeve is aluminium. You'd pick it up. The hardware on the mast would be heavier than the sleeve. Like that. That was light. That really worked. That worked really, really well. I was very happy with that. Yeah, that was one of the best things. And it's there. It's going to stay there, that kind of way.
Brilliant.
Compression bolts I put through it, I might change them and make them narrower for the ropes passing them. They ran through. There was T-balls holding in the stays that weren't strong enough, and I put compression bolts through the mast. And in the middle, they're a bit thick, and I could reduce them. It's just the sleeves are thick. I could reduce them and just have the sleeve on the outside. It's something I consider doing. Yeah.
Just one question, Pat. Like, because I know you went up the mast a couple of times. Like, how do you actually go up the mast at sea? How do you pull yourself up? Normally, you'd have someone in the cockpit winching you up, and I know you have a ladder. But how do you work the safety rope? So how do you actually do that? What's the process?
You put the ladder works fantastic. You put the ladder into the track for the mainsail, and you haul it up. So it's tight in the mast.
So you pull it up like you pull up a sail.
Yep, exactly. And where my gate is on the mast, I can leave the mainsail on that location and haul it up. And then you have a spare halyard somewhere, your main halyard or whatever, and there's a knot you can tie around it. You go around 3 times and clip it on. And you have to physically shove it up as you go up and pull it down as you go down. And if you slip, it will just tighten. So you'll be hanging off. And then there's another strap goes around the mast. So as you climb up, or when you get to the top, you can clip it on and you can lean back and you're hanging. You can work with your 2 hands.
That's the bosun's chair, is it?
No, you're still standing on the steps, but there's a strap just goes around you.
Okay.
Onto your harness, and it goes around the mast, and you can lean back down. That will tighten, You have to, if you go up with it on, you have to, when you get to the cross tracer stage, you have to open it and close it again. But the safety one is the one on the halyard.
Okay.
It's just to go around. It's a kind of an endless rope, and you go around itself 3 times and just tip it onto you. And like if you're coming down, you forget to pull it down. It'll tighten. You have to go up a step and you have to keep sliding it down as you come down.
So it's not a straightforward process.
No, but the ladder is fantastic. Okay. Compared to using another gear, I found anyway, it suited me.
Yeah,
no, for the climate aspect, yeah.
That's really interesting because that's one that's really I've been struggling to understand how that actually works. And I can imagine it's a lot easier in the flat cam of a marina than it is when you're in a swell.
Yeah.
But that's another story. So maybe we'll go back to the actual race itself, Pat. You were doing unbelievably well and we were all cheering you on, and we know you had a lot of followers in Ireland, but also elsewhere. You were coming in 3rd position, and then can you maybe just tell us a little bit about the issue that you had, which forced you to retire from the race?
Oh, about 2.5 weeks before I retired, I noticed the air is getting loose, and it was the front bearing. I wasn't sure in the beginning. I spent 2 days at one stage leaning out over the back of the boat. I was lying on the rudder actually, and it was still steering the boat, looking at it, trying to figure out how I could keep it working, because it was still working at this stage, but I knew it was starting to fail. And
can you maybe just explain to the viewers who wouldn't be familiar with the Aries wind vane what it actually does, Pat, what the purpose of that is, just so people have an understanding of it?
It's a mechanical fitting on the back of the boat. It's made of aluminium and stainless steel, and it steers the boat with the wind, and it works really well. Sailing up Burton's boat, the hydrovan isn't as good as it. I know my Aries failed, and that I come back to that, but it's just a mechanical. It's a different system to the hydrovan. It's a pendulum, like a pendulum with a clock, sticks down, swings over and back, and the wind vane on top mechanically moves that, and it just twists it, and as it twists it'll go up and down, and there's rope going onto the rudder, so it will move the tiller to move the rudder, and it's simple. And so is the hydrovan. The hydrovan is even simpler in a way, but it's more efficient and better than an electric autopilot. Wow. Unless the wind is very light. Stronger the wind gets, the better it works. And
Pat, for someone like myself, sorry, Sean, for someone like myself who isn't an experienced sailor, what I was trying to understand about the Aries wind vane, I heard you mention in another interview, and also when you arrived to Cape Town, you mentioned you were essing. Like if you're in swells and heading downwind, you almost need, am I right in saying you need the wind vane to stabilize the boat? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, the Aries, the boat goes, when you look behind in the Aries, it's like a railway track. You have a dead straight line behind you.
Okay.
The hydrovan, it was moving, you were over and back a good bit, I found, once you went over 6 knots. But yeah, once it failed, then I was jibing and with the wind behind me, and I spent 2 days not really sailing, trying to fix it, with only a tiny bit of sailing. And then I decided to sail in, and that's, yeah.
And what was the actual problem, Pat, with the Aries?
Bushing went in it, and there's bevel gears, and they one dropped down, so they were disengaging and popping over, and yeah.
And you didn't have a spare piece.
No, I didn't have any. Even if I had a spare bushing, it went off to an engineering shop twice and came back twice and still isn't right. And they had lathes and pullers and heat and that. Now, hindsight is great. If I had taken it off, I intended at Christmas to bring it over to Neelis in Amsterdam to get it serviced. And running out of time, I didn't. And like hindsight again, I should have. And yeah. a friend of mine offered, put into his car and drive over with it. And I didn't want to put him to the trouble, and I should have.
Yeah, like, and that's something, again, you know, we've been talking about and thinking about. Like, there's a lot of fail-safe that people have built in, but then there's time associated with that. There's a cost, there's a weight associated with it, and where do you stop? Because you can have two of everything, but you know, like, there's so many things on a boat that need to be potentially replaced. It's hard to know where to start and where to end. So,
and time, you'd be amazed. You can't control time. Like when I pulled it to Lanzarote in Ayrton's boat, he asked me to get some stainless steel work done. And I was there 3 weeks and I couldn't get the steel fella to turn up. Now, he apparently had health issues or something. But like, that was 3 weeks. If you were down to timelines, you would be under pressure to get it done. And, you know, one person leaves you down and another person leaves you down. And they have their own issues, like, but it just holds everything back.
Yeah. Pat, going back there just a little bit for everyone who's watching and for ourselves, we just wanted to ask you a little bit about your background. We know your father sailed around the world. He made a few stops. Was it 4 or 5 stops he made? And
on his third effort to sail around the world, I'd say 5, 6. I don't know. Yeah, I should know. But
and he went back
to
the Panama Canal. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, back to Panama. One of his crosses broke when he left Bluff in New Zealand, and he tried to climb the mast and he got a hernia. So he sailed with a kind of a jury rig to Valparaiso. It was too late to go around Cape Horn, so he went up through Panama.
And he was Pat Lawless Senior. He's the same name as himself. And am I right in saying you've a brother who's a sailor as well? Is he doing a round the world trip at the moment as well? Is that Peter?
Well, he's at home at the moment. His boat is in the Canaries. He's planning it. Yeah. He started a few times, same as the rest of us. And like, it took my father 3 times. So, yeah.
Would Peter have any interest in the Golden Globe race himself?
He did originally, and then he didn't. So yeah, no, I don't think he would now.
Yeah. And is there any particular sailors or sea stories that might have inspired you when you were younger? I mean, apart from your father, obviously.
Well, Conor O'Brien would have been the main one.
Conor O'Brien?
Conor O'Brien from Limerick, first boat to sail around the world via the Capes.
Whoa.
100 years ago this year, and in Saoirse. And it's just rebuilt. It's a lovely boat, rebuilt, yeah. So Conor O'Brien sailed around with a crew and with stops. And it was the first boat sailed around the world. Joshua Slocum went before him, but Joshua didn't go outside Cape Horn, he went inside.
Yes. Oh, I didn't know that story. That's incredible. Yeah. Did you know that, Sean?
I didn't, and I did know the piece about Slocum because I've read that book, which is another classic, but I didn't know about the Conor O'Brien adventure.
Yeah, Across 3 Oceans. I gave the book to Captain Coconut before the start of the race, actually. It's one of his books. Yeah. So yeah, he and I think what's really good, his boat got wrecked in Jamaica, I think, and some Irishman bought the boat and brought it back and has it totally rebuilt in the exact same way it was built originally. Built down in Hegarty's Boatyard in Baltimore, I think, down in Cork anyway. It's been rebuilt. I'm not sure the exact... Yeah, I know it's launched and rigged. Just before I left for the Golden Globe race, it was launched and rigged. So I don't know exactly what's going to be done with it or what it's for, but it's fantastic to have the original boat rebuilt.
That's fantastic. You've given us an episode there, Pat. I think we're going to have to do a whole episode. We'll do a trip down to Baltimore. Yeah, for sure.
We have a huge maritime history, and it's kind of forgotten. You know, he came from Fynes Island, and he would be O'Brien. Originally, he was an architect, not a naval architect. He built Ilan as well. Do you know the island or the Ilan?
Oh, yes.
He built that as well. When he sailed around the world, he pulled into the Falklands, and they liked his boat so much they ordered one off him as a workboat, and he built it. He came to Ireland, designed it and built it, and sailed it down to the Falklands. And it was a workboat down there, and then Gary McMahon went down and bought it and rebuilt that as well.
That's incredible.
Yeah, originally then the O'Brien family came from, what's that hotel? Dromoland Castle. They would have been Celtic landlords in their day. You know, they were Celtic chieftains, the family, from Brian Brew stock. Yes. Who would be that, yeah.
You've just answered one of our questions, which we had later about sailing books and stories, Pat. So thanks for that. We just want to maybe jump back to the race, Pat. So one thing that myself and Shane have been talking a lot about over the last couple of weeks is the attrition rate of the competitors. So, I mean, it feels like every week we have a different story or a different incident where somebody needs to stop or has a problem. And I'm sure you may have heard in the last 24, 48 hours, Simon's after having an issue as well.
Yeah.
So, like, there is a possibility that by the end of the race, maybe nobody is finishing in GGR class. It could potentially happen. It happened, of course, in the original race in 68. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on that, having taken part on how difficult it actually is to get to the finish line?
Before we started, I was talking to Abolish and I said that 8 would finish, and he said 5 would finish. And I said no, and I really thought I would be a finisher anyway.
Cool.
And and like the last race, the 2018 race, 4 boats sank and 1 was wrecked. And this has been a very fine Southern Ocean trip, and you wouldn't expect the attrition rate to be as high as it is. So I didn't think it would be that high anyway. And so Simon, I reckon, will be able to go on. But what will be interesting, I spent several days considering going on without the steering, because with sheet tiller you can. But then because there were so many boats lost in the last race and in the Southern Ocean, if you meet a serious storm and without self-steering, you're in trouble. It's reckless, and it wouldn't be fair to the ships who come and rescue you. And then I was looking at the race all along, and I was saying, "Pick, I could have gone on. I could have gone on. I could have gone on." I was a couple of days ahead of Abolish, and I was saying I would be there, but you wouldn't, because you don't have steering. You wouldn't be as competitive.
Yeah, so I was actually
will go on.
And well, Pat, this morning actually, the first thing we do is we look at the tracker every morning. Myself and Shane, we're having the porridge, the cup of coffee, and we're usually over and back with text and up looking at stuff on the tracker. And you can tell so much by what's happening on the tracker. For instance, we could clearly see that Kirsten was passing Abalash this morning, but we could also see that Simon has re-diverted back towards Cape Horn. So it looked like he was on his way to Chile. It looked like he was definitely into Chichester class. All of a sudden, he's heading back towards Cape Horn. So I pinged Shane and said, look, something's going on here. Turned on the tracker, the update with Don, and now it looks like he's found some kind of intermediary fix.
Well, I think he was only heading to Chile because the gale was pushing him that way without the steering. And then, he will. I'd be fairly sure Simon will go on with sheet tiller, or with some form. Maybe he can fix his hydrovan is only broken from the top up, not the bottom down, which makes it an easier fix, maybe, and maybe not fixable. But he will go on. I'm fairly sure he will go on, but he won't be as competitive. So will they catch him? Make it very interesting. Will Abolish and Kristen catch him?
Just to follow up on sheet to tiller, because I think we'll need to explain that to people, Pat. Essentially, you've lost your wind vane, so you've no automatic steering. So what is sheet to tiller? How does that work?
You tie a rope from one of your sails. Like as the wind puts more pressure on the sails, the rope stretches, and you have bungee cords tied onto the tiller and all different ways. Now, with the wind beside you or ahead of you, it's no problem. My boat is well balanced. You can sail, but with the wind behind you, it's more difficult. And I had it tied down to the staysail, and I had the staysail in different positions. And as the wind would move on the staysail, and then I did a bit on the mainsail, but it was a bit too tight. My bungee wasn't strong enough, maybe. But you try all different ways. But I have done a lot of sheet to tiller over the years, so I'd be used to it. Like I sailed 1,200 miles or 1,100 miles after the steering went into Cape Town. And the first day I had strong winds on the quarter, and I was going like an S, and I jibed a few times. When you jibe, then you have to totally jibe back. It won't jibe back. You have to jibe back. And I didn't have much mainsail up. But like I spent 2 days not really sailing, just a small jib up and trying to fix the thing. And interesting, after the sail down, myself, Tappy, and Kristen would have been in within hours of each other after 2 months at sea. It's amazing that the 3 boats, and Simon was well out in front, and Abolish a couple of days behind me, and that. But the boats were close enough. They're fairly level.
Just a follow-up question, Pat, on the attrition rate. So I think it was one of the interviews, possibly with RTE prior to the race, your feeling at the time, at least, was that the race wasn't dangerous. Crossing the Southern Ocean wasn't dangerous. But just after what happened, say, Abalash in 2018, Susie Goodall, for example, and Tapio this time, like, would you have a different view now after taking part, or do you still maintain that it isn't dangerous to go around solo? What's your view on that?
No, I maintain it's not dangerous. I only know of one person that ever died sailing around the world solo, and he went so far down into the ice, he hit ice, he just disappeared. His boat just disappeared off the tracker. I reckon he hit a growler, he went down so fast. That's good for years ago. But other than that, it's not dangerous to your health. It's maybe unfair sometimes to the ships that have to pick you up.
Yeah.
That influenced me. I said it would be kind of reckless for other people to put them out of the way if I went on without the windmill. And I did consider it, and then afterwards I was kind of sorry I didn't. And anyway.
Okay. So that was actually part of your decision, wasn't just your ability to sail the boat, but was the ability of other skippers and boats to come and rescue you and how it would put them out.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Just another question then on the actual sailing piece. So when we look at this every day, we get perfect weather forecast, Pat, that you don't get. So we have windy, we have pretty much real-time weather, and we're watching all the wind and we're going, why is such and such not going this direction? Why are they going that direction? How is it for you? Did you get weather forecasts? And if so, like, what does it actually tell you? Or is it just really you're sailing the conditions that are in front of you?
My rigging held me up before the start, and I lost a lot of time, and my anti-fouling held me up. And my anti-fouling I was very happy with, CJet, and when the company delivered it to the agent in Dublin, they misplaced a couple of tins, and I lost a couple of weeks. I was in Valencia, and I was fed up that time. But by the time I got everything sorted and when I got back to Dingle, a friend of mine, Tony, was doing the electrics, and he didn't have enough time. My weather faxes weren't working.
Okay.
And so I couldn't get the weather faxes. Now, they didn't work very well in the race anyway. So I didn't have weather, but Guy de Boer had one working, and he told us all what the weather was. So we had, down as far as the Canaries, we had weather from Guy. And then no weather much after that. You're just looking at the sky and the barometer. And that's it.
So you had two weather faxes on board. Am I right in saying that? You got one from a fisherman in Dingle, and you bought one from Guy de Boer, I think. But neither of those worked for you. You didn't have time to work them up. Okay, yeah.
I don't know whether it was the aerial. I didn't have a tuner. I did have an automatic tuner. That didn't work anyway. And Tony fitted my SSB radio and my radio receiver and all that, and all those other things worked. He just didn't have time in the week left before the race to get it working, and he tried. And I didn't get the proper tuning aerial for the one that I bought off Guy, and you need a spot. And so, and I don't think that one was going to work without. And the paper I had for the other one wouldn't work in that, so there was only a small bit of paper, and I think it was the wrong paper. You need certain paper, and anyway, that didn't work.
And just to follow up on that, Pat, like how is it in terms of the competitiveness of the race versus safety? Do competitors tend to share information? Do some of the people hold their cards closer to their chest? Do you suspect that some have more information than others? Like, what's your kind of feeling on that after your trip down to Cape Town?
Yeah, some more competitive ones maybe would hold things to themselves. Guy de Boer was fantastic. He shared everything. And I was in front of all the people that were talking. We were all talking on the SSB. And I shared every bit of weather I had. And there was helping them behind me. And but some didn't. And I'm not giving out about the ones who didn't. They're,
I mean, it's a race.
Yeah.
And of all the boats that were taking part, which would be your favorite? Obviously, aside from Green Rebel, right? But whose boat was set up the best? Which boat did you think, wow, if I was sailing this again and I had another shot and I had the choice of boats aside from your own, obviously, what would you pick?
But Kristen's boat was faster than any of them.
Right.
I wasn't impressed with her sails, and I don't think she was. She got sails, and they didn't work out that well. But her boat is the fastest, longest water line, heavier boat now and this and that. But yeah, I think her boat, and really well fitted out and rigged.
Yeah, and it looks like she still is in with a really good shot, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah. So Avalanche is going down with some health issues apparently. And you heard that this morning, and you heard that, I presume.
Yeah, we heard it too. Now, Don has said he hasn't disclosed what it is yet. I think he's okay. And just as a precaution, he's sailing at maybe 75%. So he's down to about 5 knots, and he's come slightly off the wind. So as far as we know, everything's okay. and we're not exactly sure. So we're obviously have fingers crossed for Abolition. Hopefully everything will be okay.
And Kristen then has maybe 30 hours now with the Tapio rescue.
Yes,
that's
we
right.
keep forgetting about that, Shane.
Yeah, that's right. Kirsten has the 30 hours from.
He has some bit of time as well because he went to Tapio as well.
Yeah.
He did.
What was your thoughts about Tapio sinking? Were you shocked, Pat? The boat sinking.
I was in Cape Town when the news broke. I was beside Dan and that, and he's doing some interview on Monday. I'd be fairly sure. No, he won't know what happened, so it's all speculation. But I'd be fairly sure his rudder stuck, came out of the shoe below, and twisted the tube. I can't see anything else that would sink a boat that fast. Open the hole. Either the rudder breaks the bar, or it'll make a hole in the boat. And
is there any possibility there was like a whale involved or something?
No, I wouldn't think so.
No.
He didn't have a middle pintle on it. Some people do. Like Captain Coconut had a middle pintle on his similar kind of rudder. And so, if it came out of the shoe below, the rudder's quite big. If it came out of the shoe, it just sticks in the male-female joint. And if it popped out, and his boat doesn't have high freeboard and the rudder comes up through the cockpit, it's not a lot of leverage on that. It's like a stern tube on an engine. It's gone down through the boat and it twists. And but I'm only guessing, totally guessing.
Yeah.
We'll definitely.
Don did warn us this morning not to speculate and to wait until tomorrow.
I see.
We'll definitely have to tune in. But I suppose one big question we wanted to ask you, Pat, looking forward now to 2026, to the future, what are your thoughts about possibly having another run at it?
Oh, definitely.
Definitely.
I have unfinished business, and I always dreamed of sailing around the world in a race. I'd have no interest in sailing around the world unless it was a race. Like, we have enough fantastic cruising grounds around Ireland and North and down the Mediterranean, and that's so. It has to be a race for me personally, and then when it was a dream and you still want to do it, and then plus you have you want it to beat you as well, so you have the double thing. You want to do it for the first reason, and now you want to do it for the second reason as well. So,
like I heard you talking in an interview about the race, and someone asked you, someone said to you, "Why do you want to do it? Why is it and you said, I don't really know. I can't really answer that question. I don't know why exactly I want to do it." And I found that fascinating. And I've spoken to Sean in the past, about there's something in this race that attracts me to, like, characters like yourself. There's something in it with the hero's journey. There's something in it of, I have to do this. I don't really know why, but I need to complete it. And I just find that fascinating.
Well, I have asked myself over and over again, why the fuck are you doing this? Anyway, and Conor O'Brien would have been a major influence in it. The fact that he did it when I was young, my father brought me to his grave, and it kind of gets into you. And I don't know why that. And I do scratch my wonder.
Would being the first Irishman to do it be a part of it?
Yeah, makes no difference, I think. Yeah, to me, that doesn't make any difference. People talk about that, but no, that wouldn't matter.
Okay. Let's maybe jump back to a little bit on board. There's a great clip coming from the Bay of Biscay, Les Sables d'Olonne, down to Lanzarote, and you're singing, you've Paul Brady's The Island on, you're singing along, like really roaring it out. It's classic. And for anyone that hasn't seen that, you got to look at that footage. Pat's
I haven't seen it.
Have you not seen it? It's absolute classic, Pat. It's classic. But we're really curious, what tapes did you bring on board with you?
I had a big bag of tapes, but they were kind of last minute. There was two I really liked. I forget the name. Celtic Woman and some other Celtic. They were actually both women, but they weren't all women, but they were Celtic songs anyway. And they were the two best tapes. And I had a comedian. I had a world of his tapes, and I didn't really enjoy him that much. I had a tape with Christmas music that I played once. I said, well, I'm going to play that at Christmas, but anyway, I didn't. But the two, and I found music emotional. I wasn't lonely in the race at all, but you do get, lonely isn't the right word, you think of home and you get emotional, and music would bring you to moments, of things. And I found music, which I didn't expect, found that it would bring you to places, and it was lovely, but the music was a part of the emotion of the thoughts.
That's wonderful. I was wondering. I wanted to ask you that exactly. I was going to ask you how important music is for the head and how often you listen to it. And I know Elliot was listening, and Captain Goog. I think he was a DJ. There's a few clips. If you haven't watched them, Pat, you have to watch those clips. They're brilliant. Like Goog, Captain Goog has the electronic music playing in the background. And it definitely, it must serve everybody differently for their head, especially when you're on your own for so long. I'm fascinated.
And I found myself singing a lot out loud on the deck, crap singing.
Brilliant.
Oh, we have that on video, Pat. Don't worry.
I'd sing to the birds.
Pat, just back to the boat. What was the sleep system like? Did you have a system, or did you, sleep for 20 minutes, set an alarm? Did you ever get 8 hours sleep? How did it work?
I'd sleep for 20 minutes, and you didn't need to set an alarm. Your body clock wakes you up. Now, when I got well south, I would actually sleep for an hour at a time. And you just wake up. And any wind change, you actually, even though you're asleep, you notice it. And you get up, any bit of wind change. I had a radar alarm that didn't really work. And I had an AIS alarm, which was fantastic. So the alarm would go off if a ship came within 25 miles, maybe, or more. And then you could set it down to another setting. And if it came on again, it might be 10 miles away. And if it came on, turn it down again, and it would be 2 or 3 miles away. So often when you hear the first one and you turn it down, you won't hear it again because the ship is too far away. But then you have to look and see where he is. And
at night, were you a bit more conservative at night in that you might put a reef in the mainsail or take down a little bit of sail, or did you just keep going?
Kept going, yeah. I got caught twice in doldrums. You get squalls, especially at night. I got caught twice, once with a spinnaker up. Now I got it down, no bother. And once with 2 jibs pulled out, and the wind was behind me and a squall came, and I made a mess of it. I let the pole forward and wound it in a bit, and then I was working on the other one. But it actually made the boat jibe because the pole was forward, the wind was hitting it, and the boom brake was very tight, and next minute it snapped as a boom brake to let the boat go across. The pulley block broke, it was too tight. And I looked to see what broke. It was dark. I had a head torch on, and the boat jibed back. Of course, the self-steering jibed it back, and the ropes, the main sheet hit me and pushed me over against the side of the boat, and I broke a couple of ribs. And
so that was where you got injured.
Yeah,
main sheet.
He was already sore at that stage, but yeah, that was
and it's not just the
and that was my own fault.
Yeah,
and I had too much sail up that night for the squall that came, and I if I had reefed properly, I would have done. If I had done it right, it wouldn't have happened to me. But anyway.
And when you were in bed or in your bunk, did you use a lee cloth to kind of tie yourself in if the sea was big, Pat, to stop you falling out?
No, I didn't. I had 2 bunks, one each side, and the one on the port side was up against the table. So, and there was fine, comfortable wide bunks, but that one, it was up against the table. So, and if I was going dead downwind and the boat was rolling a bit, I'd go to that one. But if the boat was heeling over, I'd go to the starboard one if that was the lee bunk, And I had a lee cloth, but I didn't use them.
Okay, so you were locked in either way, no matter which point of sail you're on.
Yeah.
Okay. And can you just maybe take us a little bit into the mind of the skipper? What was the biggest mental struggle in terms of your trip?
Not knowing where the other boats were, I suppose, trying to figure out. Before I got to Lanzarote, and in the beginning, making sure your navigation was good. With the sextant, after a while, you get confidence in it, but with the DR and with the sextant, I was conscious before I got to Lanzarote, if you didn't get a good approach and come in properly, you'd let yourself in Ireland down. That's just the way I felt. I wanted to be good, and I made Lanzarote no bother. And when I got to Lanzarote, then I was in third. And Abolish and Guy de Boer had given their position ahead of me, and I thought Kristen would be ahead of me because I had met her early in the time and she passed me, and I managed to get past her again anyway. So I was thrilled that I was third, that time.
Yeah, and of course we've seen how mistakes can happen with navigation as well. Of course, we had the incident in the north of Fuerteventura with Guy de Boer.
Oh yeah, that was sad. Yeah. I was heartbroken when I heard such a nice man. Yeah.
It must have happened.
We know he's still working on it
quickly. Pat, did it?
Oh well, it could happen to anyone. Yeah. So once you hear the boom, 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 you're on the bottom.
So Pat, again, I think this race, what's unique about it is that the technology that's been used is from 1968, roughly speaking. Can you just maybe explain how the sextant works, and for people that are not familiar with how that kind of technology works, can you just give us a couple of sentences on it?
Yeah, if you think of sunset or dawn and the sun is on the horizon, it's on the horizon on a circle, all in a big circle around the world. So you're on that circle. Anyone on that circle can see, well, it's the same if it's at an angle of 40 degrees or whatever. And it worked well between 20 and 40 degrees, between 20 and 55 degrees maybe. If you get the sun at that angle and you're on that line. So if you get, what I used to do on fine weather, I'd do 2 in the morning, and then at noon sight when the sun is at its highest, it'll give you, it's an easy one to work out. It'll give you your latitude between east and west. You'll know how far north or south you are. And then if you do 2 in the morning, a noon sight, and 2 in the afternoon, you'll be accurate to within a mile or two, that kind of way. If it's nice fine weather, but then you might get a sight for a few days again. So you're doing your dead reckoning, and then you get a sight again. And then if you met a ship, you can ask for your position, and you can ask for weather, but they don't really give, unless you get the captain of the ship, they don't have access. They'll tell you about the swell. Because the biggest problem to them is the swell. The boat will be rocking and that. But it's good to get your position confirmed.
Absolutely.
That's excellent. Pat, just going off the topic there a little bit, we wanted to ask you just if people want to follow you going forward to the 2026 GGR. Do you have a website people can follow you on, or social media?
PatLawless.com.
Excellent.
PatLawless.com. And I might do something sooner, but I mightn't. I don't know. Yeah. I have to talk to I only got home last night, and I'm only home for a week. I have to talk to the bank manager and see how much money he gave me.
And we know, Pat, that you're involved with a charity there for Parkinson's. Do you want to talk a little bit about that briefly to people?
Yeah, I can talk about it now. I found it very difficult. My wife was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And it was a shock. Never expected it. And that was only a few months before the start of the race. But she had good news since. They have done brain scans and this and that. And she has a mild version of it. And so, the Parkinson's. And it was a big one. It still is difficult. But
of course,
medication is great. And she got great news. It's even though it's very negative in the beginning. It is difficult. We're together 42. Well, we're married 42 years. We're together longer, and it was and is a difficult thing.
Oh, of course it is. Look, we'll give her our love. I hope she's doing okay. And
she's great. Yeah.
You're directly involved with a charity to do with Parkinson's. Am I right in saying that?
Parkinson's Ireland. There's I donate link on the website. Yeah.
Excellent. So people can go there to help out there. I think Sean asked Pat a few things about.
We'll post a link, Pat, both to the charity and to your website when we release this episode on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Just a couple of maybe wrap-up questions or questions that people might be curious about, Pat. So, obviously you've got races like the Vendée Globe, which use modern technology and probably cost a fortune. I mean, what does it cost someone to enter the GGR? Roughly speaking, we're not going to.
I thought I'd do it. I thought I'd do it for 100,000, and I had most of that money, and it cost me 240. And there's hidden costs. And I did a budget coming up on Ayrton's boat, and then I went over with my friend. to re-enter, it was 93,000 to re-enter with the boat even set up, and then I thought of a few things since it'll be up to 100,000 to re-enter. And I sailed for years for nothing, more or less. I'd have a mooring for the boat, and I didn't like it's sailing is a very affordable hobby. People don't realize. People have notions that it costs money. It costs more if I was a golfer, until you go into the racing.
Yeah. And what were the big ticket items that caught you out, or what are the big expenses, Pat? What are the big chunky ones?
It's endless. Like insurance, 2,000 to sail around the world. The rigging, sales, food, life rafts, medical is 2,000 for your medical. It's over 2,000 for your medical kit that you have to get for it, and anti-fall in the boat, power hosing it to get a good finish in the hull, and everything is thousands. Everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're not sure, it's 1,000 anyway, or 2.
Yeah. And the barnacles are interesting.
Yeah. Like, have you seen the videos of Jeremy's boat in Cape Town or Hobart?
Hobart.
Hobart.
It's just incredible.
Well, I wouldn't be a fan, and haven't been from the start, of the Copper Cut. To me, that was, we all have our own notions, but with my anti-falling is like chalk. It's harmless, and it's really good product, but the barnacles will stick to it. Just every boat, they're stuck to every boat, so you have to clean them up. But they'll wipe off. They'll just, it's like if they're stuck to chalk, you just wipe them off, and they'll wipe off easily. And now on the earth plate, I couldn't get them off, but they're stuck onto that. I was trying to electrocute them talking, but they held on. And going into the water is not comfortable, and trying to wipe the boat, it's difficult because it's okay along the waterline, but underneath, if you're going underneath and the boat is moving and you're banging off it. But before I left, a neighbour here, Martine Moriarty, she's an artist. Must be Dingle, is it? But herself and her partner Senna gave me a thing for cleaning the hull. It's buoyant, a right angle on it, and you just push it down and wipe off. And that, when I got that, I had to adjust it a few times, but that really worked. I put a blade onto it actually and swept along. And so if you're prepared properly, you won't really have to go into the water. And that really worked fantastic. I had a chisel tied onto a white wood chisel tied onto another piece of timber, and other ones I was getting them off with that.
Excellent.
That's fantastic, Pat, because Don was puzzled in many cases why people weren't prepared, and of course, experience showed that Jean-Luc in the previous race had a solution, and he was surprised that people just didn't copy and paste his ideas. And clearly, you had thought about it deeply, and you got.
He had CJ anti-falling as well, yeah. So
you go.
Yeah.
There's a line, Pat, in Joshua Slocum's Sailing Around the World book, and I'm paraphrasing a small bit, but it's something along the lines of, the young women and young men who want to go to sea, do it, essentially, is what he says. Is there, if to anyone who's a budding sailor or a budding adventurer, is there any sort of advice that you would have to give them?
I suppose look at Elliot. Yeah. He's such a lovely fellow, decent tea and that, yeah. But like, I was lucky that my father introduced me to this. It was a rowan boat, it was not a big boat, and then. But the old Asgard, the sail training vessel, the gun running vessel, when I was 14, that came to Limerick. And that was the first time I sailed on a proper sailing boat, proper. And I sailed from Limerick to Feinsnet as a young fella. I was just brought by my father. And he asked, it was just in his first year as a sail training vessel, and it sailed around Ireland, just generating interest in that. So the next year then, even though I was too young, I sailed in it for a weekend. You're supposed to be 16, I was only 15. And the year after that, I left school after my junior cert, and myself and my brother Jim, who was older than me, he left after his leaving. And we sailed from Dunmaurice to the Scillies and over to France. And that was my first proper sea passage. And it really, it really got me interested in proper sailing rather than I had built a boat when I was 12, a small little square punt, and I used to be sailing that around the Shannon. But there is a new big sail training vessel now coming to Ireland, and I think it can take 40 something people. It's a big Grace O'Malley, and built a submarine seal, a proper thing. So I think that's fantastic. You know, young people, once that comes online, you can pay, and hopefully it'll be subsidised. The Asgard was subsidised by the government, and like, you'll find some way of going. If you're interested, you'll get there. And
if you were to recommend any books to young people about sailing, Pat, would you recommend? I'm actually reading Motissier's book. I don't know if you've read that. You probably have.
I haven't, no.
Brilliant.
Because I was self-employed, I was very time poor for years and years, and I hadn't read many books. I hadn't read a book in years. I know when I spent 3 months in Iceland one time, I bought a fishing boat and had time to read a few books up there. But during the race, I read a lot of books and really enjoyed getting back into reading.
Right.
The books, I don't know, Across Three Oceans, Conor O'Brien, I enjoyed, but it wasn't brilliant. I read Chichester's book lately. What was the name of it? A really nice read. It was more about flying than sailing, actually. A really nice, easy read.
Excellent.
The other books I read going down weren't sailing books. One was, but I forget the name of it. It was about Fitzroy and the Beagle and Darwin. It was a lovely big thick book. I forget the name of it. The Darkness, something. But that was a really interesting book. And I read another one which was historical. What was it called? The Heller Barbados, but the Irish being sold for slaves.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of sad a bit. And then I read Cod, another good book. It was about but I hadn't read books in years and years, and it was great to get back into reading. And I'll bring a few books to Cape Town. It'll take me about 2 months to sail home, and I'll bring a few books. Well, I have some books on the boat, and Rian, who came up with me, he has some book to give me. I forget which one, some sailing book he said he'd give me.
Great. Well, Pat, I think we might wrap it up there shortly, but we just want to say thank you so much for giving us the time, and we're going to be following you closely coming up to 2026 GGR. You know, we're going to be your biggest fans, and we'll put links to your website and stuff on the episode. And look, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's meant to.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd like to say is thanks so much for the people who supported my friends and family and my sponsors, like Green Rebel, the FLI, Nikes, Newmans. And when I entered the race, a man came to Dingle. It was during COVID, and Noel Heary, I'd never met him before, and he was the first person. And O'Cahony showed the two of them. He came to me and said they'd sponsor me, and Noel said he'd like his name on the boat sailing around the world. Irish Power and Process is the company, and I sent him an email afterwards. He left me his card, and I said I need 2 winches. If he bought one, he'd have his name. But he answered straight back and said, I'll buy the 2. And I couldn't believe it. You know, people, brilliant. The support is fantastic. You know.
Yeah, like I heard you say in another interview, you talked about that word mehel, you know, that Irish. We'll all help each other. We'll all help each other, and something Sean always says, a rising tide lifts all boats. You know, it's a positive story, and it's inspired us all, Pat. So thank you. It's an amazing story.
Yeah, and thanks everyone. Yeah, and thanks lads. Yeah.
No bother.
Cheers, Pat.
We'll leave it there.
Okay.
Thanks a million, Pat.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Talking to us.